If the broad light of day could be lit in upon men's actions, it would purify them as the sun disinfects. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis wrote those words more than 100 years ago regarding transparency in government, hence the name Sunshine Week. This time each year, journalists and organizations draw attention to the laws that help citizens and media access government information as the basis of accountability and democracy. NMIF correspondent Gwyneth Dolan talks to Susan Bowe, the new executive director of the New Mexico Foundation for Open Government, about the latest issues in the state around transparency.
Sunshine Week is a time for those of us in the news media, for teachers, for folks in public libraries and in community groups to have a conversation about the public's right to know, about open government and transparency. So today we're talking to Susan Bowe, who is the executive director of the New Mexico Foundation for Open Government. And in full disclosure, I used to have Susan's job when I took a little time off journalism. So thank you for coming, Susan.
Thank you.
Sunshine Week was created by journalists in Florida, and we know that journalists are always whining about one thing or another. So why should the public care about this kind of stuff?
Well, Sunshine Week, as you know, was formed in 2005, and it was put together by journalists, but also it was organized on this particular week to coincide with the birthday of James Madison. And James Madison is largely considered the author of our Bill of Rights. So why should the public care? Well, I'm guessing most citizens care about democracy. No transparency, no openness, no democracy. And the really signature of a totalitarian country is a closed system. Records are not available, meetings are not open to the public, and that's why citizens should care. It's what keeps really democracy alive.
So I think a lot of people just feel very disconnected, though, from how having public records available means that they are having a better democracy. I mean, how does that actually work?
Well, what it means, and I think you're correct in that citizens feel disconnected, and the reason they do, in part, is we're so busy. And we can't personally go to every city council meeting, we can't go to the school board meeting, and so by default, for lack of a better term, we rely upon journalists. And journalists are not there just because this might be an interesting meeting to cover. They are really helping to keep this democratic ideal alive, and they're representing all of us.
Yeah, a lot of those meetings aren't interesting at all.
No, I've sat through quite a few of them when I was a journalist in my youth, and it does seem pretty tedious at times, but it's so important.
I just mean sometimes you'll sit there for 3 hours and there's not a single vote taken.
Exactly.
And then you have to write a story. Well,
or when I sit in on some of the legislative sessions, there's a lot of time that's spent with mariachi bands, as interesting as those may be, or honoring different groups or different citizens. And it's very nice if you're the person being honored, but when you're in the gallery, it's not quite as exciting.
So you run a hotline at FOG, and
right.
It's open to the public and to journalists. What are some of the things that people call and ask for your help with?
Well, the hotline has been around for almost 24 years, which is the length of time of FOG. And I would say the people who use it break down into 3 categories. One group, obviously, are journalists, then quite a few citizens, and I would say about 10% of the calls are actually from other lawmakers who want to make certain that meetings are open when they should be and really want to do the right thing. But the average citizen, what I have been impressed with is often it's retired men, although not always, but citizens are concerned about when, for example, school boards go into a closed meeting and they don't understand why all the information isn't available to everybody that's sitting in the gallery, and suddenly they're kicked out. And in some cases, there are certain records they're trying to obtain. We've had quite a bit of discussion and issues lately about getting access to the curriculum of the Law Enforcement Academy.
Let's talk about that one in particular, because we've seen it in the news lately. You know, people don't have access to my curriculum necessarily, and I teach here at UNM. Why should we have access to the Law Enforcement Academy's curriculum?
Well, let me just give you a heads up about your curriculum, because there is a New Mexico Attorney General opinion that said at a public university, your curriculum would be subject to the Open Records Law.
Ah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Nobody ever looks
So,
at it.
right, but just be prepared one day. But the reason the Law Enforcement Academy is of interest right now is we've had a lot of issues throughout the state of police or Department of Public Safety killing citizens.
Or other varieties of misconduct.
Or other varieties of misconduct. And historically, the curriculum of the Law Enforcement Academy has been subject to what we call rulemaking. And what rulemaking is an administrative process. It's recognizing that we can't pass a statute for, you know, every possible governmental action. And so we have this process called rulemaking. And the thing that I like about rulemaking is that it's public input is required. It's not discretionary, but we want to know what the public has to say. So you take that and apply it to the Law Enforcement Academy. And so for years and years, the public has been able to say, you know, why don't we have more courses for our new police officers on community relations, for example. And of course, the hot button item right now is, when should a police officer draw his or her gun? Now, FOG does not have a position on this. But what has happened with the rulemaking for the LEA curriculum, the Law Enforcement Academy, is it has been removed from the rulemaking process. And so now the director of the academy can determine what the curriculum is going to look like.
Is the issue that we might want to see if they've cut training in violent situations, or if they, we might want public input to say they should have more?
Exactly. And under the new rule, which was passed at the end of 2013, the curriculum is developed by the director and then approved by the LEA board, which is a public appointed board by the governor. But what happens as a result is that we don't ever have an opportunity for the public to give input. The curriculum itself, under public records law, which we call IPRA, as well as under the new rule, provides that it should be posted on the LEA website. And the curriculum was approved in December of 2013, and according to the rules, it should be posted within 7 days of approval, and we still don't know what it is.
The public really has very little chance to have an impact on law enforcement. Usually, they have the impact on us, right? And this is one of the
Exactly.
few ways that we have oversight over.
Exactly. And what is being taught to our beginning police cadets. And we believe that we don't know what they should be taught, but we need to have a full public discussion about that.
Give me an update on some of the other issues you guys are talking about. I saw something in the news the other day about court records and that the public has less access. What's going on?
The Bernalillo Metropolitan Court, which is the largest metropolitan court in the state of New Mexico, has switched from what they used to call the AS400 system to a system that we call Odyssey. And certainly there is a need for the courts to, you know, update their software and provide more modern technology. But as a result of that, this new system apparently has limitations that make it difficult to transfer all of those records from the AS400 system. The AS400 system is still going to exist, and the judges on the court will still have access to it, but the general public will not be able to access it online.
So we'll have access to fewer records.
Exactly, and I don't know the where the cutoff is going to be, and part of it is sort of speculation, but it's our understanding that several of the misdemeanor cases may not be available. And so we have expressed our concern, we meaning the Foundation for Open Government, to the supreme, really, administrator of all the courts in New Mexico, which is the New Mexico Supreme Court, about trying to make certain that those records are still accessible.
Why would any regular, normal human being ever care?
Well, if I'm an employer, I'm going to care. And if I were involved in a civil lawsuit and I wanted to make certain that I wanted to be paid in full, or if I were a criminal and had, fulfilled all my restitution obligation, I want to know what it says.
So you could, if you were an employer, you could look in there and see how many speeding tickets a person has had?
Speeding tickets, but even more serious violations than that. If I'm running a volunteer organization and I want to make certain that the person who's volunteering, perhaps working with youth, has had any infractions in the past, I need full access to that, going back many years.
One of the things, speaking of courts, one of the things I've been thinking about lately has been how we don't ever see pictures or video from the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. And I was reminded of it when we had that same-sex marriage decision here, and there was actually webcasting from our Supreme Court, which was very unusual. What do you think about what's happening in courts right now with getting video or webcasting?
Well, of course, the position of the Foundation for Open Government, and having been involved in access issues as an attorney for many years, is where cameras belong is in the courtroom. And the last pure holdout is the United States Supreme Court. And there is a big push right now during Sunshine Week by several national organizations for the Supreme Court to open up and allow a live feed during arguments. One of the reasons that the court gives for not allowing cameras in the courtroom is that the fear that attorneys are going to grandstand.
More than usual?
Well, that would be my position too. Although if you've ever listened to oral arguments from the Supreme Court, those don't necessarily keep you awake.
Well, out here in New Mexico, we have so little access to what goes on there, although the issues are so interesting. I'm sure a lot of people would be more likely to pay attention if they could.
Absolutely, and just to watch how the process works. And if you've ever been to the United States Supreme Court during really important arguments, people line up to try to get the limited gallery seating, and often it's pretty difficult to even get into the room as a reporter or even as a citizen.
So let me ask you one last question. What do we need to do as regular folks here in New Mexico to encourage government to be more accessible to the people?
Well, certainly as a citizen you can attend meetings and try to obtain records, but I think the most important thing is to talk to your lawmakers and see what their position is on transparency. That's the new buzzword, but it's easy to say it, but to put it into practice. For example, we've had a lot of controversy over whether a lawmaker's emails are subject to public records. Mm-hmm. And of course, from my position as the executive director of the Foundation for Open Government, we're a nonprofit. It's very inexpensive to join, and if you're going to talk transparency, then please come and work with us. Our hotline, which we talked about earlier, is free, and everyone is welcome to use it. Going back to the hotline, I've always been taken by the number of citizens out there who are trying to be warriors and fight the battle. And often when I respond to one of their issues, they say, well, wait till I get back and tell the fellows about this. And I love that, because they found someone that can support them in the battle.
Susan Bowe, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.